to a short fox from Warhammer 40k's Grim History from Beyond. I'm Zeckthar, and for the next few weeks we'll be covering the Siege of Medusa. This week we'll be going over the very tumultuous history of Medusa V before the actual siege. Now, the warp phenomenon known as Van Groth's rapidity pulses on the eastern fringes of the Imperial space. It is a purple glowing whirlpool of destruction that extends across light years of territory and spells destruction for those desperate or careless enough to enter it without caution. However, the rapidity is not without its uses, for though dangerous, it is also considered relatively stable by Adeptus Mechanicus observators. It is of incalculable value to the Mechanicus exploratory fleets and rogue traders who regularly pass through this region. When traversed correctly, it can hurl a warp-borne spacecraft through the eddies and tides of the immaterium with such speed that an interstellar journey through warp space can be shortened by solar months, if not standard years. As a result of this effect, despite its hazardous nature, the rapidity has earned itself the moniker of Hell's Slingshot. Upon the warp's anomaly discovered in 241.M37, the Imperial Navy and the Adeptus Mechanicus were in agreement that, carefully used, the rapidity would be of great value for the Imperial commerce and defense in the eastern fringes. So Karl von Groth, the original discoverer of the warp anomaly, was commissioned by the Imperium to locate and habitate worlds nearby that could serve as a way station and staging point for vessels seeking to make use of it. After an extensive search, a star system was located that held 2 habitable planets. An exploratory fleet, under the protection of a clan company of the Iron Hands chapter, began the process of settling the 2 worlds. In honor of the Iron Hands, who began exterminating the indigenous alien populations of both planets, the system was named Medusa, a tribute to their own home world. Medusa IV was the larger and more bountiful of the 2 habitable planets in the Medusa system, and the exploratory fleet descended in force. Masters in the arts of planetary settlement, the explorators quickly brought Medusa IV under the Emperor's rule. Great cities were erected within only solar months, becoming massive expanses of gleaming metal. Huge settlement craft, loaded with civilian settlers drawn from hive worlds across the Imperium in search of new beginnings, brought people both willing and fearful to their new home. By comparison, Medusa V, the second habitable world of the system, was only settled in part by the Imperium. The Iron Hands obtained a foothold spanning an entire continent with their customary military efficiency. But further conquest was then halted. An urgent summons drew the elements of the chapter in the Medusa system away to assist in a suppression of an uprising against the Imperium, and the exploratory fleet went about its business alone. With valuable mining regions already established on the continent that was under human control, further exploration and settlement of Medusa V was deemed unnecessary by the Mechanicus and postponed indefinitely. Despite its obvious advantages, its mineral wealth and proximity to Hell's Slingshot, the Medusa system had one flaw: severe warp storms, originated from their rapidity, would occasionally flare up, cutting the system off from outside travel or astropathic communication, sometimes for solar months, standard years, or even decades at a time. On each occasion of a major warp storm, contact with the Imperium was restored swiftly once the storm receded, and each time the message from the inhabitants of the Medusa system was always the same: all is well. Medusa IV became a vast imperial populous center. The plentiful supplies of food and temperate climate of the planet assisted its growth into a hive world, and soon tens of billions of humans toiled in the vast hive cities erected upon its surface. By contrast, Medusa V remained barren. Only a few cities were established, each devoted to mining precious iridium ore and drilling for promethium that would feed the Imperial fleet's berth at the great orbital space docks erected around the planet. Hundreds of starships passed through Medusa V's space docks, Imperial Navy fleets in need of rapid supply, exploratory fleets that emptied entire population centers from Medusa IV's hive cities for resettlement elsewhere, and rogue traders who needed rations and fuel before daring Hell's slingshot in an effort to launch themselves further into the unexplored galactic east. Though contact was regularly lost with the Medusa system, its value is recognized by all in the Imperium. Since its settlement, the Medusa system has seen dozens of minor military incidents. Frequent raids by Eldari pirates harried Imperial shipping in the region, while the Tau Empire, as it grew in confidence and strength, coveted the worlds for its own resources. None of these foes, or the dozens others that threatened the Imperium's hold on the two worlds, came as perilously close to breaking the Imperium's grip as the Medusa Schism that raged throughout the system 250 standard years ago, around 750.M41. During a prolonged period of isolation from the broader Imperium caused by a warp storm from the Rapidity. The schism began when two of the largest hive cities of Medusa IV declared themselves independent of the Imperium. The Imperial planetary authorities acted swiftly, dispatching 3 regiments of planetary militia to suppress the rebels and bring the cities back under control. Now, nobody knows how long betrayal had festered in the hearts of those fallen subjects of the Emperor of Mankind, but the rot that gnawed at the underbelly of Medusa IV was deeper and more malignant than anyone would have guessed. Well-armed and utterly fanatical worshippers of the ruinous powers of chaos greeted the planetary militia's regiments with a storm of fire. Banners declared allegiance to the chaos powers were unfurled, and the true cause of the unrest was at last revealed. Degenerate chaos cultists and planetary militia waged war in the streets of the great hives for solar weeks before the situation took another turn for the worse. More Medusan hive cities declared themselves for chaos, and vast armies of chaos worshippers marched forth. Lush agricultural districts were put to the torch by the forces of chaos, and millions died in their panic to escape. With every passing solar month, more of the populace of Medusa IV degenerated into insanity, siding with the dark gods and turning their backs upon the sacred light of the Emperor. Soon, only a few major hive cities remained loyal to the Imperium. Overwhelmed and outnumbered, the Loyalists sent astropathic pleas for help. Their urgent calls for aid went unanswered for the most part, for while the warp storms that isolated the system persisted, no help from the Imperium would come. Only Medusa V was able to answer the call, and with admirable courage and unshakable faith in the Emperor, an army of sorts was mustered. With no real military force of its own, the meager planetary defense force of Medusa V recruited thousands of willing miners and laborers before departing for Medusa IV on commandeered bulk ore freighters and supply vessels. For 2.5 standard years, Medusa V's hastily raised army kept the citizens of Medusa IV still loyal to the Emperor from being totally overwhelmed, turning back one assault by the chaos cultists after another. Eventually, the defenders knew there could be no true victory against such odds, not even when the warp storm finally dissipated and the second company of the Ultramarines was at last able to come to the planet's aid. The Inquisition dispatched its agents to ascertain the scale of Medusa IV's heresy, and eventually, regrettably, the Inquisition determined that exterminatus was the only viable solution. The Cult Mechanicus and the Adeptus Administratum lobbied the Inquisition agents monitoring the schism to suspend the sentence just long enough to allow what loyalist citizens remained on Medusa IV to be evacuated. Tithe forecasts and resettlement schedules showed the crippling effect leaving them to die would have a negative effect on industry in the sector. So the Inquisition granted a 1-week stay of execution. Millions of loyalists were loaded onto transports normally used for shipping foodstuffs to Medusa IV, and a mass exodus of loyalist hive cities began. While the Ultramarines and the PDF regiments of Medusa V fought a heroic rearguard defense against an endless horde of insane chaos cultists, those innocents that could be saved were ferried off-world to Medusa V. Even the Astartes could only prevail so long in the face of such overwhelming numbers and unreasoning hate. Finally, they too were forced to withdraw, leaving the heretics and remaining civilians to their fate. A sleek inquisitorial corvette under the command of Inquisitor Baptiste fired a single salvo of cyclonic torpedoes at the planet, a deadly payload of variant known as atmospheric incinerator torpedoes. The warheads ignited the oxygen-rich atmosphere of the planet in a massive thermonuclear reaction, devouring everything in a blistering boom that seared all signs of life from the world, turning metal into molten slag and rock to glass as the Inquisition's fiery judgment took its toll. The planet burned brightly for a whole solar month, and from the safety of their own world, the people of Medusa V looked on in awe as their neighbor was consumed in the purifying flames of the Emperor's justice. Those loyalist citizens of Medusa IV who had escaped offered prayers of gratitude to the Emperor for their deliverance. The new residents of Medusa V arrived from their burning planet by the millions and were welcomed by the waiting agents of the Inquisition Ordo Hereticus. A drawn-out process of screening to root out any heretics amongst the refugees commenced, and many thousands found their way to the pyre as the Inquisition acted ruthlessly to ensure the future purity of Medusa V. Colossal prefabricated cities were hastily erected by the Adeptus Mechanicus, vast structures that could house millions upon millions. Into these makeshift hive cities, the refugees of Medusa IV were herded in droves, kept separate as a precaution against the spread of heresy. These refugee cities, grim edifices of steel and stone, gradually found their place within the society of Medusa V, providing a vast new labor force to work the ore extracted from the mining world's crust. In only a few standard years, Medusa V found itself producing more promethium fuels, metals, and supplies than it had ever been able to manage before the arrival of the refugees of Medusa IV. And so the populace of Medusa V lived well and prospered for hundreds of years, until the ruinous power struck again in the late 41st millennium. But they were not alone. The Tau would have their say. The Necrons too, along the Drukhari and the Eldari. Seeing all this combat, our green friends also tossed in their hat, because it looked like a good crumpin'. Yes. Work! And so next time we shall discuss the reasons why everyone wants Medusa V, be it orc, elf, or undead. I hope you enjoyed this Vox, and if you did, feel free to like, comment, follow, or subscribe. And if you really enjoyed our stuff, please support us by becoming a member on Tales of Ashwaka, our YouTube channel. Have a great day, and as always, until next time, this is Zeckthar, signing off.